So I had somebody present to me a new concept that I haven't really thought about, or I really definitely didn't know about, but I learned about it Wednesday. And it was right after the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln was the turning point when we stopped referring to the United States are and
Mhm.
we changed it to the United States is. And we underplay how much that conceptually changed our understanding of the country. Because a point you just made is quite literally my favorite part of being a part of this little experiment that we're totally failing at this point. But I love the fact that we're 50 different states.
Yeah.
And for the masses that are not well read, they don't really understand what a state is, right? If you grow up in the American education system, you get a different concept of what a state is versus what for 2000 years every man and woman that has conceptualized the state of people. It's like a government, it's a state, it's its own population entity, if that's an accurate way of describing it. And so what makes the United States a luxury is that if you don't like what's going on in your state, go find the state of your
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And here's the real problem. If you can't out of 50 states find anybody that wants to support your idea, newsflash, you might have a bad one. Maybe this is the first time it's been told to you, but you probably got a bad idea. That's the utilitarian way, right? Find the group that most abides by your will. And if not, then you've got a bad will. So bringing it full circle, it's sad that we've departed from that concept. My was yelling at me the other day because there's 12 states in this country that abortion is illegal. That's a travesty. Guess what? Not a problem in my state. So how am I losing sleep? Like, if you don't like the problem, then go to the state where you could be amongst the people that are like, oh yeah, flush it away. We're all good. But if you're in Texas and they're like, we don't like this, then maybe you shouldn't be in Texas. I don't know. But that's an extreme example of what I think is more of the grander point, which is we've lost our conception of the fact that we are just 50. The more local you get, the more effective you will be at protecting people's liberties and creating safe spaces. I don't know. That's my diatribe. We need to get back to the United States are.
That is a solid you've thought that out. You definitely
You know what? I wish that was the case, but it was a passing comment leaving bourbon night Wednesday evening. And I didn't think about it again until you said that. I'm like, this is the perfect chance. We need to get back to the United States are. That's the one bad thing Abraham Lincoln did. Yeah.
I like that. Actually, I'm gonna probably take that and like roll with what you just said in regards to like the are versus is, because that is actually like the vernacular is really, really important in how we kind of go about it, like collectively, right? As an entire country versus what is it like the house divided will never succeed or something like that. So
Yes.
I always say like I have two phrases I always go by. You should aspire to inspire, and also we're better together. Because ultimately, I truly believe that I can talk about that in regards to like almost any area. I think that we're better together. That's always what I kind of like my little slogan I like to go by.
I love that. No, and it's true. I mean, what I love about this new chapter of the human experience is they created the internet, then they let us have it because they thought, we controlled them with the radio, we controlled them with the TV, we're going to control them with the internet, and it totally escaped them. It plugged the human hive together, and we're the strongest we've ever been because we're the most connected we've ever been. So I totally agree. The more together we are, the stronger we are.
So I love that term, think tank. Think tank. You know what a think tank is? Like, how's a think tank go, James?
Yeah, they got cancel culture nowadays. You gotta watch what you say. It's getting real scary out here.
Yeah, I don't we might as well. It's the Rethink Tank. Looks like you had a little bit too much to think here in the Rethink Tank.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? And thanks for joining us again. Today, I have a really exciting episode, one that's personal to me, but also I think it'll bring about a lot of fruitful dialogue, not only in the medical field or the legal field, but just personally. I think it'll resonate with a lot of people. So I'm excited to introduce my guest today, who's the co-founder of Her Health AI. She's a healthcare attorney, pageant runner for Miss Florida, and quite the Swiss Army knife with all of her activities and exciting hobbies. So without further ado, please let me bring in my guest here and someone that I'm really excited to speak with, Akifa Khattak. Akifa, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Please, I gave a little brief background for you, but your background is so extensive. Your resume just keeps going like a CVS receipt. So please, if you could tell some of the folks about yourself as we kick off today's episode.
No, I mean, you pretty much nailed it. Healthcare attorney. I have a background in business and science as well from Cornell and Hopkins. So previously I was working in as a transactional attorney representing providers and hospital systems. I love, healthcare industry in general. And then I went in industry with Her Health AI. I have a little bit of a different approach there. We're working with artificial intelligence, biotechnology, etc. Amongst other things that I do is Codiva. It's a women's health supplement. It's coming out soon. I'm very excited about it. And I work with different lobbying groups, bipartisan, to get healthcare reform done, as well as I have a different life, right? I'm a millennial, so I enjoy my hobbies, which include pageantry, modeling. I played ice hockey my entire life. I'm a huge UFC fan.
That's
I
so
could go
awesome.
on and on. I love stand up. Yeah.
So let me ask you that before we get into it, because I saw some of it. How long have you been dabbling with stand-up? Because that's something I know. I have notes in my iPhone that just go on forever. One day I'm gonna rip the Band-Aid off, but to do it, what provoked you, and how long have you been messing with that?
So I actually am a comedy nerd, and I've even followed a lot of like the now mega stars when they were really, really just fresh and up and coming. And I have jokes in my phone from when I was in college. So something funny happens, I'll put it in my phone and I'll just have like the punchline there and a little bit about the story. So then later I'm like, ooh, maybe I can use this as content or material. And I've done that since college. So I don't know, since probably I went to college when I was 16, so like 16, 17.
Wow.
But to be performing stand up, that was more of a newer thing because I was always afraid and I would just have these jokes there because I knew one day I have a big to-do list. Everyone has bucket lists, but mine is a to-do list and it has huge accomplishments on it or goals that I set that are a bit delusional, but I think that, you should try to sky's the limit and see where you fall essentially. But yeah, so I have been dabbling with comedy, I'd say a bit this past year. It's just a hobby though. It's not my pursuit right now. Who knows in the future?
That's right. So you said you went to college at 16?
Yeah.
What was that like? I mean, talk about being thrown in the deep end quick.
It was good. I think ultimately now as an adult, I'm so happy that happened because I did grow up quickly, I would say, which had its pros and cons when you're in the social aspect of college, right? However, now in retrospect, I feel like I have so much more time and I did get to accomplish a lot at younger ages. So now I get to bridge the two, which is exactly what I'm doing as a Kifa, I would say, hopefully a role model. I've worked 10 years in professionally, trying to do everything with healthcare law, technology, building your network. So I want to bridge professional to public, and I also want to bridge creative with technical skills. So, whether it's the modeling, pageantry, trying to be a likable voice to the public, as well as educating them, inspiring them, in anything I do, whatever categories that opportunities arise, So I'm open. And I think creative is a huge way that we can bridge all of that. So, yep.
No, that's perfect because I'm glad you brought us back full circle, because one of the most important accolades that you bring to the table that I neglected was kind of your mantra and the agenda through your whole pursuit, which is better together and seeking knowledge through dialogues with and exchanges with maybe some challenging personalities along with the good, easygoing ones, because sometimes that's where the most growth and knowledge is found. So being willing to talk to people that are different than you, that you may even disagree with, something is hard to do here. I greatly appreciate that, and makes this an even more exciting conversation.
Absolutely.
So with
Thank you.
that being said, let's launch right into it, because you're a wealth of information, and I've failed to do a good job of tap into it as we've rekindled here, getting ready. So one of the things I really want to pick your brain on, pun intended,
Oh my goodness.
is that you've done a publication recently on brain chips and health and legal considerations for these brain computers. So I want to ask you kind of, can you present this new future science, and again, those very large ramifications that come with it legally and medically?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of what I wrote about, it's brain computer interface technologies. And what that is BCI technologies. It's essentially having brain chips. But it's not just brain chips internally. BCI technologies, you can have external technologies or internal. So I'll just first divide it like that. So when you have external, it's things like, for example, headsets that maybe might be used for a therapy, or the visual goggles, etc., that can help in some form of, I'm going to put it in the healthcare context, right? Like if it's a visual impairment or a mood issue. So there are different kind of innovative tech-based tech-based therapies, tech-based innovations essentially. Now, there's the internal one, which is truly a brain chip. Neuralink, Synchron, they're all working on it. So Elon Musk's project is also on this. I think they even had like their human clinical trials, etc. But what got me interested in this is the healthcare portion of it. And, obviously, this is an extremely touchy subject in regards to morality, in regards to ethical regulations, in regards to data collection, data privacy, control, etc. Like, as a consumer. But then, with that being said, with any kind of innovation, you are kind of pushing the envelope, and you have to see, whether it's ultimately good or bad, right? That's how we base negligence too. Is it the risk versus the reward benefit, right? And so, in regards to this in particular, um, the context for healthcare is, will people have a benefit for having a brain chip in a circumstance where, let's say, they're in a vegetative state, and this has actually been shown, where they're able to articulate themselves when they're completely paraplegic, or and
Wow.
they have a computer that will say, I want X, Y, and Z. It's literally talking for them. Or if they're half, paralyzed, can't use their arm, it helps that they're able to use their arm. And they'll be able to completely search the web, etc., and almost have that cognitive function. Sometimes you'll think someone is a vegetable, but this actually says, hey, no, they're not actually brain dead. Then you can put them on the computer, and then they can even participate in their medical care. They can participate in their, ultimately all these different things. But along with that comes, from an industry perspective, now informed consent. Now we're going into like the legal considerations, the healthcare considerations. If somebody is in a vegetative space and they're trying to figure out their end of care, how can we know that it's authentic? How can we know that it's, truly what they want, right? Without any hacking, etc. That authenticity, but also the informed consent. So there's a lot of different. When you're going into court, are we going to be able to use this as evidence, right?
Wow.
That's a huge thing. But at the same time, it helps. It's been helping people that are disabled essentially. Now, do we want to go and commercialize that? Now, people that are healthy, how far do we want to take it? In other countries, they'll even have their health records like on their arm, etc. Some people are more open to that. Some people are like, hey, you're playing, with fire here. We don't know how far this is going to go, and I don't want anyone to be part of my, bodily, autonomy. Just leave me alone. But more people are willing. So, there's a lot of things that come with that. Legally and also in court and also healthcare wise, innovation. There's a lot to talk about ethically.
You have really dropped an atom bomb here, because I'm rolling with you. You're talking about all these different developments internally, externally, and you're just kind of rolling with it until the rubber meets the road. Okay, so first off, one of the thoughts that I was going to suppress, because Akifa is a well-mannered professional and only I have crazy thoughts. But my first thought was, if you could allow, and I'm using your professional medical term, if you could have a vegetable talk, and it's talking through this device and it's telling you that I'm a vegetable, but I've got thoughts.
Okay.
Yes, paraplegic, or honestly, like, I've seen paraplegics where the vegetative state goes beyond calling them paraplegic, where they're literally like incoherent in so many ways. And that's where my mind goes, especially when we kind of use the colloquial term of like a vegetative state, because even a paraplegic could get an exoskeleton or something that, at least, again, I'm not trying to use cruel language, but language limits our ability to think in these realms. And the truth is, there is a person who's limited but can still find access to this realm that we play in. And then there's people where it's like, yeah, you could talk to us, dude, but there's nothing beyond what flavor of applesauce you want. Like that, we're never getting you vertical. You're never, but okay, that was a thought that I was going to suppress because I wanted to do justice. I wanted you to be able to avoid my crazy thoughts. But then you bring an even greater point, which is, how does this data then transfer to the courtroom, right? So I'm suppressing these thoughts. I'm trying not to say them. Then we're getting to a point where Mr. Gates makes a computer, plugs it into the cucumber. The cucumber says, I don't want to die. However, the cucumber 2 decades ago said, I want Aunt Josie to make the decision for me. Now the vegetable, the cucumber, is saying, I don't want Josie, Aunt Josie, she's crazy. I want Mr. Gates's computer to solidify the fact that I want to renege upon what I first put in my will, and also have this computer data be my will. Okay, I've also walked that, in this whole time you've talked, I've walked this whole dialogue out of my head. And my next thought would be, the only way, if I was the king of the law playground, I would draw the line at, if you did not have Mr. Gates's computer in your will, Aunt Josie still presides. If you have given agency in this type of scenario through your will to someone else, that can never be trumped or defeated by this new technology. So what is our motive here? How do we move forward? Make people socially aware of this science as soon as possible, as soon as it's developed and as soon as it's socialized. Make people conceptually internalize it as soon as possible. So now they can go into their own homes and decide, do I want Mr. Gates's computer to be my agent? And then I'm putting blind faith in that science, because you don't know the science. Who are you kidding? So you're going to put blind faith in the science. And Mr. Gates, one, has full integrity, and it works. That's a whole nother element to it. So you could either put blind faith into the system or stick with what's worked for 10 centuries, which is trust your descendant. Like, that's it. Trust the people around you and hope to God you didn't treat them so poorly that they still have your best will at heart. That would be the way I go about it. You got to go through the will. And we're in this gray area where, well, it's not in the will because I didn't know it didn't exist yet. You can't talk about time machines that don't exist yet. I hear you. So that's why there's a social responsibility to make them aware as possible or as soon as possible. So that way they either integrate it into their will, and if it's not, line drawn, doesn't exist, Aunt Josie takes the reins.
So
What are
I
your
have
thoughts?
a question for you.
Oh.
Wow, what are my thoughts after that, huh? Thought, no pressure there, right? Just no big deal. Just tell me everything you're thinking. And it's recorded now. Well, I think that the first thing is you made a lot of valid points, actually. The one is that we have to have informed decision making. I'm a huge proponent for informed decision making. Now, whatever the person decides is ultimately up to them with their health care, with their end of life care, with anything in regard to how they would like to live their life, essentially, right? We want to respect people's wishes. So, to have that is on the consumer side is you need to know what you're getting yourself into. That's through education, that's through figuring out. And on the industry side, this is where it gets tricky because there's responsible AI. You ultimately need to have responsible AI, a responsible tech. You need to have a lot of it has to be highly regulated when you're dealing with that kind of autonomy. You're dealing with someone's autonomy, with their health, their life and death, and then truly like their decisions. So when you are a healthcare professional, a legal professional, and you're working on these kind of things, we have to make policies that are hold accountability, that check within the system the data. And then when you're running your clinical trials and you're doing everything, first of all, you need people to be willing to sign up for these things. And this one is a very far-fetched innovation that, you either kind of love it or you hate it. And some people are on the bandwagon of, I'll try it when it works in 10 years and I know the long-term side effects, which again is not wrong for anyone to think that, right? It's just a matter of where do you fall. But for those that are more willing to try it out earlier, I would say to them, they're going to be a part of the testing of everything, of how it will work, etc. And they'll know all the that's part of the clinical trials, of the pros and cons of that. But it's a very difficult subject, and that's kind of maybe why I wrote about it, right? That this innovation exists, it can be extremely beneficial, and then some people think it might be like a zombie apocalypse, or not even a zombie apocalypse, that man and machine, we're bridging it. But AI is here to stay. I always say that it's like the new I like to say that it's the new electricity, essentially, or the new calculator. We still have math, but even with math, we didn't stop learning math because we got the calculator. Actually, math got even more advanced, right? We used it as a tool. So we're hoping that with responsible AI, with having all the ethics in place, that we can use all these innovations that will ultimately benefit people. But now we also live in a free market consumer world where people's priorities are different, right? Are they here to make money? Are they here to help people? And so all of that has to be taken in consideration while you're going through all of this.
My first car was a Charger. Then I had 3 Challengers, and that was always my dream car. So when I finally got it, I was ecstatic, and I still have my Challenger. My lease is up here soon, and I need to get a new car. And I just learned about the Dodge brothers and how they sued Ford because Ford was doing so well. He had all this extra cash that he wanted to funnel the money back to his employees. So the consumer wasn't going to see the benefit, but he thought, I'm going to, and it would evolve the market, right? The competition within the market would change because the Ford workers would be getting so much substantially more. So the Dodge brothers sued Ford because, and this lawsuit established the precedent that now all boards or all of these companies have I'm butchering the language, they have a responsibility and a duty to put profit for the shareholders before the consumer and their employee. So if any point a company prioritizes the customer or the employee, they're open to lawsuit. So now there's a legal mechanism at which their whole corporate focus, whether it's cars or it's making you a vaccine, it's always going to be maximizing profit for the shareholders above anything else. And so again, this is the post world we're in. It's crazy to think, like, just so you know, 2020 was I'm graduating law school, and then a pandemic hits. And so we've been so far away from that world, because I lived it at the beginning in Harrisburg and then came back home. And that was such a fever dream that we have like completely detached from its existence so fast. And it's an instinct, like it's how we're going to cope and move on. It's a human way, we adapt. But the problem with that is we really have forgotten, ignored, and moved on from all of that experience. And it's crazy to think, again, I love your point, informed decision making. We need to push for policies that hold accountability. So guess what? Don't be surprised when people support going against executive orders, holding and protecting the richest government officials ever paid by the White House for lying to us and cheating us. So again, bringing it full circle, it is crazy that we live in this world where the mechanism is against us. The mechanism is pushing for profit overall. And the champions of accountability, the legal experts attacking and balancing this medical field, that's their role, is this David and Goliath fighting against the legal mechanism itself. The board game we're playing is built against you, and yet your role is the most pivotal, or else it goes so imbalanced, we're growing three heads. And that's your truth.
I mean, the legal system, healthcare, technology, all of these industries are extremely regulated, and they pretty much are the foundations of how our society, lives and functions, right? Like, we need our laws, we need our health, and the system for that, and then even our tech, like, you have NVIDIA, etc. I mean, all these chips that literally help the foundation of the entire modern society. So, what is it? Lisa Su is a CEO for the semiconductor company, sister company along with NVIDIA, and they run the entire modern society essentially by healthcare, all the chips that we need for our technology there, for transportation, for our phone, for our computer, etc. And now you add AI to all of this, right? You need to have the policies, the accountability with it. But it's everything in life, I think, is a give or take. You have innovation, you have people that have to push the envelope, and you need people to be on board with it. And then you have others that need to go and say, hey, there needs to be a checks and balances here. And we have to ultimately, it's the negligence thing, is the risk outweigh the benefit. But even if the risk does, when you're talking about innovation, you're thinking, okay, well, how far do we push that envelope to experiment to see, versus this is actually doing a very big harm to everyone involved here. But yeah, I can definitely empathize. This is the thoughts that keep me up at night all the time, because ultimately it's not just even they're not statistics. We're not just consumers, we are people, and this is our food. For example, I worked in a law firm for a little while doing transportation, importing and exporting, like, essentially, right? That was agricultural law. Okay. And you would be shocked at not only the standards for what the US is versus Europe in terms of our food safety, but also in terms of transportation and what they accept versus not accept. I mean, think about it. You have, let's say, cargo ships full of apples that come from, I don't know, Mexico or something like that. And then they have to make sure that how are they going to be preserved, the temperature of the cargo ships, or even temperatures of the trucks, make sure that everything, there's no mold, there's no nothing falls over. And then what about the trucks that fall in transportation, or you have a truck driver that does something that is not good to these, fruits and vegetables, etc. So there's a lot of accountability that goes in it, and that is a particular niche of law that holds that accountable. So you can imagine for everything we've done. And then I even worked on a grand jury investigation. Actually, as when I was in law school, I was able to be part of this case for the Office of Attorney General, and it was environmental crimes. And they had football fields of these oil companies essentially dumping all of their waste, into the water, and because they were doing fracking, and instead of doing the fracking correctly, they were like, we rather just pay the fines and just get rid of our waste however we want to. And here you had, politicians, it's a long time ago now, but you had politicians, you had the oil companies, you even had judges and the EPA involved in having to testify in front of the grand jury saying, yeah, this is what happened. Because ultimately, when I talk about informed decision making, it's the operations of stuff. And it's going to come full circle here. With the grand jury investigation, people were, certain people were paid off, had to look the other side. And you know what ultimately happened? The Pennsylvanian people were suffering. So people that lived there, I literally went through hundreds of thousands of people that they were named their where they lived and what they had. So cancers, rashes, people that passed away, people that they got paid off by the companies to move or got free water for life. And sometimes their water tanks would actually explode, because there were so many chemicals in it. So, and this is the health and wellness of your constituents. And so it's with food, with water, with our tech, with our healthcare, right? I can go and give examples in each industry. So they're highly regulated. You need to have accountability, but then you also have to have people on both sides. And that's when I go and I talk about informed decision making, and making sure that, whatever we do, we have people on every side to kind of combat that. And ultimately, it comes down to making sure that your operational process is working. And I think this is the business side of me. In anything you do, when you're giving a product, even from like a warehouse to getting delivered, right, from Amazon, you have to go through a 3PL, you have to go through whatever, your distributor, etc. There's so many things that can go wrong, right? Same with healthcare, same with law. And so people will be like, I don't really like the government because of this, or I don't really like the big pharma or the tech company. Well, these sometimes there you have true people that are working for, trying to help treatments and trying to do research, coupled with people that have, different priorities for money, etc. But then you do need funding for things. Being, a startup founder, I do need funding for a lot of things that I'm doing, right? So you have to look at the operational efficiency and see what the bottleneck is and take out the bottleneck, because what is the biggest issue in this operational problem that is holding back the complete efficiency? And if you can eliminate that one thing, your overall efficiency will be much better on a product level, but even on like a larger scale. And like I think people kind of will look at the federal government or just governments in general, and they'll say, wow, like all of this is messed up, etc. But they don't understand how many hundreds of thousands of people are part of this giant system, and how many, and so you have to take that in account when you're dealing with things. And I think ultimately informed decision making, having good operational efficiency in whatever industry you're in will help that. That was my long-winded answer.
Brilliant answer. No, truthfully. And, keeping my schizophrenia grounded as I rant about like COVID or something, right? One of the cool points that your exposition really highlights is when it comes to like efficiency, you've got this huge mechanism, and like using an anecdotal example, ventilators. So everybody wants to throw their politics or conspiracies and kind of put a guise over how they're interpreting this scenario where we needed ventilators. We put a whole bunch of people on ventilators, and it wasn't until later we learned that this was killing people. Now, you want, as I flirt with the idea of looking at like a specific actor. You want to be able to be like, it's all so-and-so's fault. We told you it was that guy. But there's so many moving parts and there's so many considerations that, yeah, maybe one person makes the call at a certain point, but that person is making a call based on an entire mechanism of information. And the data that was coming from that mechanism showed that this was the best operation for it. I didn't see the data, but I sure as hell got to hope that the data didn't show this is the worst thing. And they were like, do it. That's what we want. So I got to believe that the data showed one thing. It was the best. And it wasn't until we got better data through experience and just time that we learned, that actually wasn't the case. So really, if you do ventilators again, now we really got a problem. But the bigger point is you've got this huge mechanism. And if you tried to point to a single person, it'd be futile. And it definitely wouldn't be beneficial to the larger outcome you're seeking. So when we talk about efficiency, one of the things that you started your point off with, and it came full circle back to, here is a system that is extremely regulated, but there's necessities to many of these regulations, and there's a why to a lot of these considerations. So let me ask you, as somebody who's in the trenches, as you experience this, do you feel as though we're in a world of overregulation, or do you think that no, and we probably have room for more and more to come?
Alex, you know my answer to that as a lawyer. It depends on the surrounding circumstances.
You
It
had to
depends
do it.
on the context on which you are referring to. So that is quite a broad question for me to answer correctly. It depends on the industry, the healthcare, etc. I mean, and actually it's even case by case, and it's a very lawyerly answer, but it's true. We have to look at, is it ventilators? Is it food? Is it technology? Again, how many people are using this? What is the cost of it? What actually happened here in terms of how are we, what's the consequences of it, right? And also going back to your data point, a huge thing too is that we always talk about you got to look at the data. First of all, there's a lot of fake news with social media and all the different bots, etc. Like literally, there's active manipulation, I would say, within the, I don't want to say the internet, but there I don't want to get into politics or too much with, but certain governments are able to use and weaponize technology for their benefit, right? To push fake news, but also there's bio warfare as well that actually can be a national security risk, right? The food we eat, etc. All kind genetic warfare too, and I can go into detail more about that. It kind of goes in line with like, our food, etc. But essentially, we have to make sure that we're looking at real data, not fake data, not self-proclaimed, experts sometimes. Although we do have to listen to what the public is truly saying and the public's experience, right? Again, we have to be cautious. And when you're going more in the industry and you're looking at actual data, you'll be shocked that there's so many biases that happen when you're collecting it. And that's why even insurance companies get hesitant of accepting AI technology, right? Because they're like, we don't know how real this data is, etc. There needs to be a checks and balances for this. Their algorithms, their testing, but the data itself. So for women, we're only allowed in clinical trials in 1993. And also with that being said, there's also minorities are not shown that much in clinical trials, but you could go and say that for all types of things too. If let's say you're a white male, but you don't fit the category of what the data was collected for, ultimately that can negatively affect you, right? So we have to look at the diversity in the data. And when I mean that, I'm not talking about race only. Like, for example, in women's health, a pregnant versus a non-pregnant woman, like how would they get affected by this, right? An elderly person versus a younger person, a person with autoimmune versus not. So whatever you're trying to look at, but we have to look at the inputs for the data, and then we have to make sure we do checks and balances for the data as well, that it's a big, class size, that it's being able to be replicated as well, without too much change in the results. So there's a lot that comes into that too.
I can appreciate that. And so when it comes to informed decision making, I love you hit the attorney ripcord, which is, is it extremely regulated, or is it overregulated or under-regulated? It depends. So I think to unfold a little bit more truth here, I think the best thing would be to get into some like real world examples. So we do a live show on Tuesdays, and this was something that I was going to be using for our Tuesday show, but I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to kind of piggyback off of our dialogue here. So, this may surprise you, but I'm of the kind that loves cookies. And so when I just have this new house and I need to make cookies, and I don't have spray for the pan or the sheet so they don't stick. So I go to the grocery store. Now, the Greek in me is everything is olive oil. I don't use vegetable oil for anything. I just,
by the way,
well, dropping truth bombs. So I needed to get some olive oil, and in law school I would drizzle olive oil and like with a paper towel spread it, and I don't know, I just don't like the artificial sprays and I don't trust it. So I took the time to sit there and read the different. I ignored all the vegetable oil and all of the artificial oils, and I was just looking at the olive oil sprays. And so the biggest brand in this space is Pam. So, this is what people naturally reach for. And I just want my olive oil sprayed on the pan. Olive oil, virgin olive oil, sprayed on the pan. You don't need to add anything else. Really, just pressurize air, and that's it. Air, I breathe that stuff. Whatever combination of oxygen, carbon, whatever you need to put in there, most of it I'm breathing. So you don't need to really mess with that either. Just give me olive oil. What does the label say? So I start getting into it, and the label suggests, and you know what? I don't want to do us the disservice here. So I want to read the name of it exactly. So they give us the ingredients are extra virgin olive oil. Perfect. That's what I'm looking for. Soy lecithin. It prevents sticking. Okay, I'll get past that. Soy. Okay, I could get past this soy boy stuff. Okay. Dimethyl silicone. And they tell you don't look at it over here. This is for anti-foaming. I'm going to be real clear. I don't care if my olive oil foams insofar as it accomplishes the goal and doesn't give me cancer. That's a win-win. So now I'm frustrated. I'm in the grocery aisle, and I gotta figure out what is dimethyl silicone. If you go to food companies, they're like, don't. It's very minimal, and it's no big deal. It's so minimal, it literally doesn't matter. Don't even think about it. It's a nothing. It's a non-issue. Why do we get the ability to say that? Because the FDA said we're good. Then you go and read about dimethyl silicone, and they're like, yeah, this shouldn't be in your. Okay, that's the food people. They're like, it's good. FDA says it's good. Go talk to the paint people. The paint people are like, do not get this anywhere near you. Anywhere near you. If it touches your skin, run. Run for your life. And you're like, and this is the under seedlings to my cookies? Then, for like $2 more for the same thing, go to get the organic stuff. It's just $2 more. How refreshing is it for, and you know what? They deserve it. I'll pay $4 more for a company to just boldly be able to say, ha ha, one ingredient. That's it. That's all we got. Air and virgin olive oil. I walked out of there skipping. Got exactly what I wanted. Now let's ground my point here. What's frustrating is you have to attack this problem in one of two ways. Either, I don't know, the plastic silicone they're putting in your food should not be in your food, like the poisonous dyes and everything else. Conversations we've had forever, but when the wrong people start doing it, we shut down, we get frustrated. That's politics though, baby. So you either decide, get rid of the poison, or the other attack is Pam gets to go, whoa, you already threw a whole fleet of Akifas at me. Brilliant legal attorneys that have crippled our ability, and they've made our responsibilities clear. It's not vague. The line is drawn. We need to tell you we put the plastic that's killing you in there. We didn't need to remove the plastic from it. We just needed to tell your dumb ass that it's in there. And we know that we've created a whole social mechanism that you're never going to read it. There is a whole corporate mechanism that relies upon you ain't reading it. The fact that I'm in high school, and not to continue to belabor the same like similar stories, some folks may have heard this before, but South Park answered this or addressed this in one of the greatest ways. And I'm not a big South Park fan.
Go on a political rant and then put South Park in your answer.
Oh, this is the best. You're gonna love it even more. This is political science at its highest level. They did an episode where people, if you remember when you first got your iPods, there were terms of services all the time. Like there was an update almost every month, and every month you had to go, I agree, give me the update. And if you hit the little blue hyperlink to, I don't know what you're agreeing on, it took you to a page of infinity. You could scroll till your finger broke off of legalese. What's that?
Do you look at the terms and agreements for those?
Oh my God, you try. Okay, again, rewinding the clock to a corporate prisoner at the age of 12. At 31, I throw my helmet and sword on, and I'm reading that shit because we are not on the same team. But at 12, I'm having faith in the fact that I'm not being preyed upon. But bringing us back to South Park, the satirical way they address the fact that we just blindly sign contracts and have no idea what they're saying was the human centipede. So everybody was signing up for the new, updates. And then Apple grabbed 3 kids and sewed them together and was like, you agreed to this. You hit, I agree. And they scrolled all the way to the bottom. They're like, oh my God, I agreed to be a part of the human centipede. An outrageous satirical reflection on a huge problem, which is what was one of the things, at least it was for me, one of the things that you learn because you kind of understand it, but it was never taught to you directly. One of the things you learn when you go to contracts class is that you're making a contract like everywhere you go. Everything you're doing and every action is a contract. No. I'm just going to the baseball game. No, turn that bitch over. It's actually an entire contract. You've been duped again. So you sit here and everything is a contract, and yet we don't read any of them. We just blindly walk into it, and then we're scratching our heads because we don't have any ability for, as you said it, boom, 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 policies that hold people accountable. So here's my problem. Something that is a thread that ties my whole family together, something I've heard the grandparents say forever, is the masses are the asses. So are you going to choose to try to get the masses to become here? Something I say on here all the time. Everybody wants a political opinion. Nobody wants to do the political homework. So how do you keep a world where I can teach it to you, but I can't learn it for you? And nobody actually wants to grow and adapt. They want it to be done for them. We live in a society where I log on to Instagram every day and I scroll for hours seeing the lifestyle that I wish I had, but then I do nothing to achieve that lifestyle. Then I look at you and I go, it's your fault I don't have it. You owe it to me. That's the society we're dealing with. And now I throw it to you. You have a policy consideration. Is the policy consideration to get the plastics out of it, or do we acknowledge that this is a free market and they're allowed to put poisons in their food? We just hope the consumer's educated enough to choose the non-poisonous over the poisonous. And yet every time we're sitting here with growths coming out of every corner of our body and we're like, but this is my truth, baby cakes.
Oof.
Oh yeah, I love this. I love just building the biggest snowball and just throwing it at you.
Okay, I had like 4 points that I was thinking to kind of, go along with that. The first is it enough, exactly what you said, to give notice, or that we should now be accountable and take out certain things, right? And that's not just with food, like also think about social media. You gave a good point about we're looking at Instagram and scrolling now. Again, people will say, okay, the development of a kid versus an adult, etc. But also, is it right for the users to be a part of such an algorithm that is so calculated, right, that can essentially not only know everything about how you do your purchases or what your content likes and dislikes are, but ultimately, if they wanted a bit of, lack of better terms, like brainwashing, how would where's the accountability for this, right? You can look at it at both sides, because going back, let me go step by step. For the food portion of it, is it enough to have notice? I'm not going to answer any of these questions, but
Sure.
it's a good topic, because I can't, in terms of I
Right.
can't.
No, please. I respect it.
No, it's not even like about my platform, etc. I'm very much an attorney trying to advocate and educate the youth. So these are tough topics, and I'm not scared to answer them, because one, I have the knowledge to, and what I can say is my opinion as along with that, right? But for the notice part, also, if you think about it, there's certain, legally, this, that there's, how big is the notice, and did the person actually
Yeah.
get sufficient notice? And so if you're
Cheers.
just clicking a button and you're like, oh, this is sufficient notice, right? That's like the one key point, because companies have gotten very sophisticated on what can be considered sufficient notice. So I think we have to look at that issue within itself, or maybe redefine what's appropriate and not appropriate. Excuse me, or even like a time lag between the two, um, that you need 10 minutes to like read the page before you click the next one. Something that can, like, could be a measure. I don't know what that would look like. Secondly, with social media and things like that, you have to also consider, here you got people that completely change the fabric of society through these platforms and innovations, right? How we connect with each other. But their focus is not having censorship, and they're always going in front of Congress to say, hey, you guys can't over censor us. And Congress is there as the checks and balances, saying like, well, what about all this war content or this or that happened because of your platform, and they're like, it's not the platform, it's the user. So you have this back and forth, right? Now what about people that have taken so much content that are depressed and then go and commit suicide, teenagers or something like that, right? Now are they an active aggressor, a part of this? Who's accountable for some of this kind of stuff? If they have unequal bargaining power and they have all this data collection about us, and they're talking about censorship, shouldn't they be held accountable? But again, it's a give or take, because at the same time, you don't want to have so much censorship. If you look at different countries that have a lot of censorship, Now you'll have people complain the other way, going, we want to have the free market, like they censor everything, so we make all these fake accounts to go and try to get what we need, right? It's such a complex, and I don't think we will ever, in a lot of these things, get, to have a paradise of perfection. Again, it's all operational. It's all
Right.
operational. Literally, it's operational. So informed decision and operational efficiency in all of these things. Even with the recalls with food, etc. So and it's ongoing because we're living. So those two things have to be looked at. If you want to look at how can we maintain ourselves in a manner that's balanced, informed consent, and also operational efficiency, and that will give us accountability, if that makes sense.
That is an incredible answer, because I think you really tapped into it. That's bringing the theoretical and grounding it in reality, because it doesn't matter. We could talk ourselves till we're blue in the face, working out every theoretical angle to this, but it doesn't really, the rubber doesn't hit the road until there's actual actors that are impacted by this. As I walk out every scenario about clicking agree and that impact, the contract that you agreed to that you didn't even read, you propose potential policies to address that issue, making them sit there on the page for 10 minutes or something like that. But then there again, that's why there's attorneys. We could attack that from every angle. But what's the point of attacking or supporting that from every possible angle if it's not in reality? Like if it's just a couple of thinkers in a room chatting, it really isn't. And not to take away from theoretical exercises, because there is value there. But really, you need to remind yourself that you need to keep a lot of that grounded in real action. So when you're talking about specifically that example, right? Agreeing to a massive contract that we've been socialized into just ignoring. The problem does present itself, and I love it's a legal inquiry that could be a podcast of its own. But what started your whole conversation off was, is it enough to give notice? And once you start getting into the weeds of how to truly legally dissect these, you and I, like, I'm speaking your language, and you're addressing a great point. And what I think the majority of my audience doesn't realize is you took a whole new encyclopedia off the shelf and we're on page 1. That's a whole new book. That's the notice. That's one legal element consideration to this huge problem we've just walked out for probably a half hour. It's just notice. It's just notice. That's one little piece of a big, big consideration. One of the things my uncle pointed out to me well before law school, I'm in grade school, we're driving on the freeway, and there's this very huge roundabout leaving the freeway, getting off the freeway. And he goes, you see these signs that say no parking? He goes, you want to know why that exists? Because of attorneys. Attorneys are the reason we got to put some sign on an exit. It's an exit ramp. You can't stop here. You can't park here. But somebody tried to do it once, and then they got an attorney, and we had to go to court. And now, they found in his favor because there wasn't a sign saying no parking. So now we got to have no parking signs on every exit ramp just to ensure you can't pull that loophole here. And I think part of the sticky piece is that really worked. The mechanism of legal development worked when there were no rules. And then every time an issue came about, we're like, all right, make another rule. The thing we got to be weary about is if we walk this road to its nth degree, and we're getting pretty close to it, we're now living in that kind of post world where there's kind of a law for everything. We really can't make heads or tails of reality, and it'll get so bad that there's policing of every movement you have. Like, one thing that I am pretty passionate about is people filming in public. Okay. So there's no expectation of privacy in the public, period. That's what it is. But some legally ignorant white lady gets a phone on the sidewalk and it doesn't even involve her. But I didn't give you permission. You can't do that, and you got to delete that right now. And now we've created a whole world of entrepreneurs or social media content creators that have made a whole business out of auditing this whole law. They just go around the country filming people. And the people on the flip side are like, well, what would you want that for if not for something gross? Like, you know, and then that dialogue develops. And it's like, well, because one, you're not the creative. You've never thought of why somebody would be doing that, right? What if I wanted a B-roll of the bridge? Well, it's unfortunate that you and your daughter walked by. But you're in public.
Filmmakers in general, yes.
Exactly. And then there's a whole nother element to this dialogue of we're so afraid of our neighbors, the people that we share this community with, that my first assumption of you exercising your right is that you're using it maliciously. However, you could just be using it for any creative purpose or personal purpose. However, Target, Walmart, Avis Rent-A-Center, they're recording your every move. Target didn't ask you if they could record you in the parking lot, as you're getting out of your car, as you're walking to the store, as you're when you're not even in the store or in the parking lot, you just happen to walk around the back and you're on the tow path that goes along the back side of the building. Well, they got you because you're in sight. You don't even think to consider your privacy against a corporate actor. Your only instinct is to be threatened and think about that same exact scenario against your neighbor. And this whole thing, long diatribe, totally waste your time because you want to get back to a question for me. But my whole thing is we live in a society where the actors don't even know what the law is. They don't even know they're right. And I'm also making a congruent argument that everything does feel like we've got more red tape than we know what to do with. So we've got more policing than we've had in the past. And yet the public is more ignorant to what the lines are to begin with than they were in the past. So what is the benefit of continuous line drawing if we get lost in the entanglement of this whole mechanism? If it can become counterproductive is what it feels like.
No, but okay, so going back to your
yes.
Let's circle all the way back, okay? Because you always have really, solid train of thoughts, right? That are valuable that people have to look into. So you're talking about notice, and that's one portion of it. And coupled with that is having informed consent, of course. And then you also have to consider the other portion of this is that in real life, not theoretically, they can give notice, etc. But corporations are not, short of funds. So they are sometimes okay with paying off all these fines. Where I'm going with is that when you're doing policies, typically the rationale behind it is that you want to make sure that it's a deterrent or something to promote something, right? And so if the deterrent isn't a strong enough penalty and they're okay just shoveling out money saying, you know what, it will cost us less in the long term to pay off these fines, then that is a huge issue, and we have to reevaluate what we consider our policies and how we make them, and where are we going to push the rationale with the detriment and the reward. Also having whistleblowers and people that are accountable, what kind of benefits do they get as well? In terms of corporations, again, we put a lot of power in corporations in the US and I think in the West in general, because if you look at other countries, I mean, they all have different systems. So you have to take even healthcare, etc., different kinds of corruptions with governments, etc. But if you look at other countries, there are a lot of mom and pops businesses and stores and careers still. Now in America, it came over time that we have efficiency, and we have, ease. And so we're able to put, instead of working for your own entrepreneurial store, etc., a baker, having a collective, individual farming, etc., having whatever your trade is, we've now run it to, let's go get a degree so you can work for a big corp, right? And those are, that's when you get into antitrust issues and huge, monopolies essentially. And I think Americans, in terms of not only, you can talk about the government and say, okay, well, overregulation, underregulation, but coupled with that is the free market, because we do live in a democracy. If we're talking about the US in particular, and we give a lot of power to big corporations that are running it. And that's when, okay, where's the accountability? But it also takes away our autonomy as Americans to be able to really advocate for ourselves and see where we want to be. So if we are having our jobs for the big corporations, if they're the ones that are okay giving us our, here's all what you're going to eat, and we're going to give you the guidelines of what the standards are. I believe like some of the biggest fast food companies are sponsors for like the American Diabetic Association, American Heart Association, etc. So, and who's making all these charts of what's healthy versus not healthy. And I think we have to reclaim back our autonomy and support local businesses, support having Americans be entrepreneurial again. And although it might make life maybe tad bit harder in terms of getting, your food, getting your etc., whatever it is, even if it's your school uniforms. I mean, think about it. If I grew up again in Zimbabwe, in a different country, and you'd hardly get these large corporations do that. But with that being said, there was a lot more autonomy and even controlling things, because you were able to go after that certain, farmer or that certain etc., rather than now we have no ability to, because they have too much power.
Okay. I really didn't want to make this a part of our dialogue because it's a dense one. But,
Okay.
we have a society that's hyper focused on universal basic health care. And I can't help but inquire, because you bring a special perspective to the table here, right? Having been able to experience two different, polarizing society types, approaches to these type of mechanisms, and again the social policing within it. I have a heart, right? You've heard me enough to where my heart's in the right place, where it's like, of course,
I have a hard
I
time.
don't want a world where somebody needs something done and they can't accomplish it.
Mhm.
But then the conversation gets a little bit murky when you have to start considering like how much of our medical expenses are obesity related. Listen, it didn't fall short on me that I'm sitting here fighting over silicone in my spray, as if that is the bigger factor and not the cookies that's being cooked on it. I'm not dumb, but also like acknowledge what the real problem is, right? And so I live in a world where, of course, I want everybody to have free healthcare. Of course, I want all of these necessary procedures to go addressed. But then some of these necessary procedures don't feel so necessary. They're just Rolo bags are addicting. And then on the flip side of it, my sister's a pharmacist, and her position is staunchly against a universal basic health care, because when you have a mechanism where it's all standardized by the state, you've created the opportunity for complacency or mediocrity. And some people, especially those that tend to strive for the top, they tend to be passionate towards competition, because it allows for a rewarding mechanism or a system that motivates those that could achieve those heights to actually do that. Because if there is a ceiling and we all have to live below it, then those that were going to shatter the ceiling and go beyond it never do. It's kind of like the flea scenario, about fleas. Like if you put them in a jar and you put a lid on that and they just keep bouncing into the lid, the next generation of fleas, if you take the lid off, they'll never go beyond that point, because they've just been socialized. That's the ceiling, even when there isn't one. So here's the difficulty: is you want to have a heart, you want to make it available to everybody, but everybody, not everybody, But a large number of people take advantage of these systems and also are part of the reason why the system is having such difficulty to begin with. We're wasting our time on what I would like to proclaim is maybe unnecessary procedures. I'd rather be able to get two new eyeballs transplanted into a head than your diabetes. Like, and that's totally cruel, and I get it. And that's my fight to fight. But it's a difficult conversation, and I respect where you may be limited in how you approach it. But I have to ask you, as somebody that's experienced different societies and their different approaches to this, what is your position on a universal basic health care?
Universal basic healthcare.
Universal health care, just
universal healthcare. My position from in industry and as a patient is very unique because not only born in New York, raised in Zimbabwe, and obviously Florida is home. I also had the opportunity to live in Germany for a while, and I was able to use their medical system there. I also was a patient in Brazil, and I actually had a surgery in Brazil too. So I got to experience healthcare systems all over. And not only, like I said, not only that, my background is health administration from Cornell, a master's in that. So how hospitals essentially function on the business side of it, and pharma and biotech. And I will say that, again, it comes down to no system is going to be perfect because of how large and how many constituents they are, or not constituents, but how many people essentially they have to, I guess you could say constituents they have, but and also, it comes down to operational efficiency. It literally does come down to that, because both systems and all systems have issues. And I can advocate for that from being a patient on it, but also on the exec side of it. With that being said, there's a lot of pros in different things. I can highly, highly, advocate for Brazil's system because they have public and private. And again, I came. They have public
That'd be
and
probably the
private.
strongest.
Also, I will say, wherever you are in the world, if you have more money, you have more access. That's why underserved communities ultimately are the ones that suffer, because, I went to these countries and overall I was in a good situation for the most part and even for me, it was difficult to pay for things and to get access to things and to get certain costs, etc. So you can imagine other people that really, don't even have the knowledge to navigate this. So, in regards to what do I think about the systems, I believe that in the US, you also have to look how big the country is. You have a country like Germany, it's the size of Texas. So obviously they're going to have a different way of doing things and how they're able to get things done. Now, in the US, you have so large, and then each state also has different regulations, etc. I think it's wise that you have a public and a private system, ultimately. I don't take for granted having free markets. I don't take for granted being able to have private insurances. But also, I do believe that every single person is entitled to basic fundamental human rights, and health being one of them. I mean, you're so afraid to go to just get sick. And for someone, I had 3 surgeries in 6 months. They cut me in 32 places. I had a case not found in medical history, and that's why I'm a huge advocate for endometriosis. And because it's one of the top 10 most painful diseases you can have. 200 million women have it worldwide. Its prevalence is like diabetes, and you get diagnosed through surgery. And so why it takes 10 years to get diagnosed is all your labs come back like negative, and they think that you're fine. And so for me, I had a very rare case, and it was hard to get all my reimbursement, etc. But in terms of the systems, if you can afford it, and you can get private insurance, obviously I would say do that, especially if you have a history, where you're immunocompromised, etc. Now, I also believe that it's the responsibility of the government, if it's going to be your health, welfare, and safety of the people when you're governing people, that they should have some form of access to health, obviously, right? With that being said, there's obviously tax dollars, etc., and where's that money going? So you have to look at the operational things and say, okay, well, where is there, the highest corruption or the bottleneck that's causing all these issues? I work on reimbursement reform with bipartisan lobbying, and I'm actually going to the White House twice, like in the next couple of weeks, and I have a certification I'm wrapping up for reimbursement specifically, because huge part of this is that people are suffering because they getting out of pocket expenses, and that it's falling on them, and that comes from the insurance companies. And I can go heavy in reimbursement if you want me to, but my ultimate answer is that if you look at countries that have complete, like universal healthcare, etc., and I have family that live in these countries. Like, let's say, okay, just differences. Canada, like UK, etc. It takes so long to get a basic appointment. I have like my family calling me on the phone going, I'm so sick. I can't get my medication. My appointment with my general doctor is in 8 months. And so you have the public, you have, access, but now the timeline, because they're so backed up, it's a problem. So they're not getting, and then they have to go for very severe surgeries. They're not able to get what they need quicker. Now you go and you have private, obviously it comes with the complications, but ultimately, I think if you have private and public, that's the best. And I also think that if you can afford it, you want to look at your health is your wealth, essentially. So that's my overall take on the part of the patient. I think they need to also work with their insurance companies and actually call and say, hey, listen, this got denied. Why? Or like try to, again, inform decision making. These doctors need to put the correct codes. If you just change the billing code, sometimes it's covered by the insurance company. And the insurance company typically wants people that are is it healthy? Yeah, I believe healthy, because if they're sick, it eats up into their budget overall. So that's when you're getting into something called value-based care and fee-for-service care. And how hospitals run is that it's a fee-for-service thing, meaning that you pay for something and then, you get a service in return. They say, though, that when you have a fee-for-service system, doctors will just go, hey, you need this, you need this, you need this, bill. So they needed accountability. What do? They say, now we need value-based care. So what is the patient outcome? What is the quality of care? Are you getting repeat surgeries? So all these CEOs in the hospitals are going, listen, we need to make sure that we're not only saving money for the hospital but we're also making sure that the quality of care is better. So they're moving to a value-based care. But it's still money, though. It's still wrapped in a fee for service. And insurance companies are very much behind this, where they're saying, what's the economic data? Why is it beneficial for us to adopt your technology or adopt your test, when it's eating into our budget? So there has to be a lot of reimbursement reform, essentially.
I love you really nailed it. One, your expertise shined through in that. I really do think you came to the right conclusion. I'm not saying I'm the expert, but I'm saying I'm convinced that's the answer, just simply by your explanation, bar none. One of the things that you take away is really the perfect anything, like being fully committed to any camp is probably the most dangerous in any dialogue, right? So when we talk about like capitalism versus socialism, really the right answer is somewhere in the middle. When you talk about, free medical care versus private medical care, it's probably somewhere in the middle, some combination of the two. This is kind of why these conversations are so pivotal and important, is because they want you to look at anybody as the other, whatever that defining agent is, whether it's gender or background, culture, the skin tone, whatever. It's all immutable. And yet that's the only thing we focus on, because one of the themes that I really beat heavily is the more you talk to people that are different than you, the more we realize we pretty much agree on everything. And the only thing that's different are the little nuances. So I love the point of all systems have issues. And usually that's the ripcord that people will use to kind of evade having to have the valuable dialogue. Like, let's get to an answer. And right now our answer may be wrong, but let's have an answer today. So at least further conversations, we have something to challenge. Let's ground ourselves with a foundation so then we can build upon it. But then we also have to be real about it. Like, we want to hate capitalism. We want to hate private, types of mechanisms where people are profiting and the haves and the have-nots. But can we acknowledge how cool it is to live in America? This is a little bit of Cleveland hubris coming out here, but like, we have the Cleveland Clinic. And so when I went to the Middle East and you go to the UAE, the fact that dictators are like, we're going to build a Louvre here because we're going to have the best museum in the world here. We're going to build, and they need the best of everything. And then they're like, and we're going to build a Cleveland Clinic in Abu Dhabi because we need to have the best hospital. Let that settle in. Just in the Middle East, in the middle of the UAE, they're like, we want a Cleveland Clinic. And I'm telling you right now, it's the prettiest building you've ever seen in your life. It's awe-inspiring. So the fact that I get to live in a world where right down the street is a place where Saudi princesses fly to the other side of the world to have the most reliable, like, heart care, or whatever the specialty may be. And it's in pockets across the country, and it's also elsewhere. It is something that excites you, but you also need to recognize that type of sophistication, that type of development really doesn't come from a world that doesn't reward it. You need to have that motivation. So keeping it balanced then with all of the people that can't really hit the highest heights, as long as you make sure they don't fall through the cracks and they're still being taken care of respectfully, not just, we're just checking a box, respectfully taking care of the masses. You also need to have that balance with that type of, private competition, I think.
No, I completely agree. Like I said, and it depends on the country, right? Like, the same things that work for America is not going to work for a small country, let's say in Europe, etc. I mean, like, there's no need for that kind of complex infrastructure for depending on your population size, depending on different cultural things, etc. But it's funny in terms of healthcare systems. I really do I think that the Singaporean healthcare system is thriving. Like, they have it really figured out for what they have for their people. And in general, going back to how people in authority can help the people that they, their constituents, etc. You mentioned the Middle East, so I'm just gonna piggyback off of that. I have friends that I went to college with that were exchange students from Saudi Arabia, and it was interesting because they said, you know what, we got our school paid for by the government. We have a plane ticket twice a year to go back, which is paid by the government. We also have $2,000 of spending money that's paid by the government. And then you'll get a lot of foreign nationals, not foreign national, exchange students come, or let's say they come from other places, but they'll go back to their country. So they'll get the best education in the world, in terms of our skill sets, etc., and then go and work with their economies. Now, being a person that is from the States, obviously, I think that we should have the best of the best stay in the US, obviously, to have the country thrive. One moment. So, we have to definitely, each country, and I'm going to say that for each country and each leader has to take care of the people that they're ruling over, essentially, and looking after. So whether it's in the United States, that we have to consider that, right? That is actually happening here. Versus if you're from Russia, etc. But can we learn from others? Absolutely. Should we be working with others? Absolutely. I don't think that we should have a bunch of what's it called, like trade wars, and also neglect also the global benefits it is from working with others. I wanted to shift gears as well. And I wanted to ask you something, put the ball in your court, because I have my own opinion. What do you think about police in general? And over the past, I would say early, like I think COVID time, there was a lot of Blue Lives Matter, etc. And what's your opinion on police regulations and how that goes about?
Ooh. Oh, and I wanna think of the example I heard just yesterday. It was so good.
Because I've thought about this quite a bit, and I'm curious to know what
Perfect.
your opinion is.
My answer, of course, is going to be pretty stereotypical, and on its surface is that there are bad people. Like, oh my God, my grandmother woke up every day. She said every day, 50% of the world wakes up trying to figure out how they can screw over the other 50%. So that's the world we live in. And so that 50% that's waking up every day with the malicious intent, or not even the intent, but is a malicious actor, intentional or not, um, that person can wear any type of hat. And whether they're the president, they're the Speaker of the House, they are your bus driver, or they are a police officer, those people exist. They will be your doctor. They will be your attorney. I mean, they find themselves in all aspects of this life. So that is the human experience. We take for granted what we get to enjoy from the existence of this force. And it's kind of like my opinion on the legal field too. Like, I am an advocate, but I'm also an advocate only because I'm the strongest adversary. Like, I'm at war with it. And so I have faith in it because I know that it's good. And just the way I was raised, I settle for nothing but perfection. So until we reach that, which is impossible, I'm going to continue to demand more. So when I look at this, perfect example, I implore any human watching this, you must listen to Dave Smith. He's the smartest libertarian, but he's the smartest political mind in this realm right now. And he gave the perfect example on Joe Rogan this week. And he said, when you're an outfielder in the outfield
Love
playing
Rogan, by the
baseball,
way. I definitely want to be on his podcast one day too. I love
I
his
would never. That
podcast.
I would turn it down. Of course
Really?
not. Oh my God.
What? We're talking about trying to get to know people that have different opinions than you and different styles. That would be the perfect platform, no?
Oh my God. I'd only be so lucky. But one of the examples he provided, or the perfect metaphor, is an outfielder during a baseball game. Every play, excuse me, every pitch, which could exceed 6, 7, 8, 9 pitches a batter. How many foul balls you got? Every single pitch, that outfielder needs to get in position and anticipate a hit. So every pitch, it's get in position. No, nope, it's just a strike. Get in position. Nope, nothing. Oh, it's just a pop out to the other side. Oh, nope, it's a grounder to second. But every pitch, they have to anticipate a hit coming to them. And that is the life of a police officer. Out of 10 cars you pull over, there is nothing. And we just had an officer that was killed recently where the guy's like, yeah, no, I don't have my license. And he's super cordial and super amenable until things just snap and he shoots the officer and it becomes a whole thing. So it's one of those, back to a dialogue I have with that sovereign citizen. I'll play these games, we'll have these theoretical exercises, but it all ends in the same place, which is you don't want to live in anarchy. When I was in college, some of the funnest and some of the most fun and also the most brilliant minds in the classroom were the people that were totally tied to anarchy. And the thing that I kind of really appreciated about their pursuit, because that's a thing, like when you're in philosophy, there are doctrines or theories that just you attach yourself to that resonate the most with you and kind of become your identity. At the time, I was all about determinism. I was totally drinking the Kool-Aid of determinism. So the people that were really tied to anarchy fascinated me because they were wrong. That's just it. Like every time we'd walk, it doesn't matter what the conversation was today. Is it morality? Is it metaphysics? Your relationship to your soul and your body? It doesn't matter. They were always wrong, but holy hell, were they a hard challenge for any person in the room. And that's what I found the most appreciative of it. So again, grounding ourselves back to your answer. You need to acknowledge it as much as it's fun to think about a world, what it would look like. You don't want to live in a world of law and order or without law and order, of just straight anarchy where we're policing ourselves. So we agree that we need a shared mechanism. Now, this is where the, real work needs to be done. You don't like that you got a ticket on State Road for going 10 miles over the speed limit, and you think based on the social use of that road, it really should just be 10 miles faster. Okay, well now you're disgruntled, and that feeling is not towards the law, the fact that it exists, but really you just disagree with where the line was drawn. But also you're not a political actor. You take no steps to go to your council meetings and try to actually change the speed limit so you don't get a ticket. Instead, you either just choose to break the law because you don't want to be a part of the change that you want to be a part, or you it's either you take the initiative and just break the law, or you abide by it and complain. You just complain. I don't agree with it, but I go 10 miles under. Those people are the reason, one, action never gets done, but why it's all talk. And so it's a double-edged sword. Not only is we're not accomplishing anything, but all you hear is the noise of complaints, which is so far from productive. So I think police are necessary. We need to talk about how it's a fraternity of guys, but really a fraternity of people, because now there's a lot of female officers, and these fraternal type of relationships protect their own. And so you've seen interpersonal problems, where they don't call out each other, or they might be apart or complacent in the problem. Well, if we don't have the real conversation, then that never gets addressed. So just defunding it and turning it off doesn't fix the fact that we have real people that have human faculty issues. And how do we address that? Well, then you need to start working on mechanisms for accountability. I mean, it's laughable. One of the things I wrote down in your plethora, you audible to something totally away from medicine, but like talking about accountability through whistleblowers. I laugh that this is the first hope. This is the first guy of goodness, the first superhero we have as a president. And he's like, I'm running as whistleblowers. And then the second he becomes president, he's like, I'm throwing every whistleblower in prison. And then the two biggest whistleblowers that the most valiant people, the most valiant Americans, and one of them wasn't even American. He's British and Russian. We're just like, yeah, you're dead to us. You're dead to us, and we're hunting you across the world. That's how we feel about whistleblowers. So bringing it full circle, you need to have mechanisms for accountability. You actually need to mean it when you say you want to allow for whistleblowers. Just like, you're the gold star. I am the agitator from the back of the room, because I sit there and I go, when I look at academics, I'm so thankful that I can be a sophisticated player in conversations like this. At the same time, I guess it's half full versus half empty. My perspective is opposite yours in that what I see more than anything is where it fell short. And so I felt that we can bond over the 3 or 4 people that changed our lives within the academic system. But then the person that hyper focuses on that tends to ignore the 3 or 4 people that should never have been employed as a teacher, professor, or otherwise. And so when we talk about academics, you're never going to get a stronger academic system if you will only look at it in one realm. You only focus on the good teachers. Well, how do we make more of these folks? And how do we, motivate them and reward them and focus on these people? We need more of them. But you totally ignored, how did these people get in here? How did this guy make a 30-year career out of being one of the worst teachers the students have ever had? Build a consensus. Or that's just teachers. Same thing goes for doctors, right? Like medicine. Somebody really likes getting paid off by the pill people. Well, they're in the same profession as the guy that's like, you know what? You really don't need that treatment. In most scenarios, we would give it to you just because that's what we do. But we don't need to make them money. Why? You don't need it. Those people are rare. But if we don't have that talk, then we're not going to actually be productive with the dialogue. So I don't want to, this is my attorney back at you. I refuse to give you a straight up answer. Do I love cops? Heck no. Far from it. But are we going to seriously lie to ourselves and pretend we want a system without it? Look at the Summer of Love. Cupcake shots and courts were burned down. We just said it was peaceful. It was a good time. It was all a fun time. There.
This is a beautiful, beautiful rant there. You had a lot on your chest and you said it with your chest, and I appreciate that.
There's a lot on this chest. So what is your position on all this? I threw a lot. My chest had a lot to throw at you.
Yeah. A lot of things we actually, you have a different way of delivering your concerns, but they're very much in line with a lot of the concerns that I have and the things that I think about, right? And so even though I don't deal often, I would say nowadays, with police, etc., because I did a little bit of more criminal work at one point, a little bit of stuff, but not that much. I thought about this, and it goes back to policies and how we deter versus incentivize somebody to do something, right? And when you think of the police in general as a collective, they have one of the highest burdens to protect human life, essentially, which is what other careers are like that. Surgeons, doctors, attorneys, that someone could go into jail or lose their whole livelihood, etc. It can affect very big things, estate planning. These are high stress fields. They also take a lot to get into a position to where you have a license, which is revocable. Remember, a license is a privilege. And when you have such a license to do that, and you are looking after someone's livelihood or life, there's a lot of training that goes with it. So where I believe the biggest, if you're looking at operational efficiency and you're looking at bottlenecks and looking at how can I make the system better, I apologize. I would say it's the entry level of who can be a police officer. I much rather have quality over quantity. And I think a lot of times police officers don't get necessarily the training they need to be equipped to understand that they're dealing with human lives, and they have that privilege without the abuse of power. So you can do checks and balances later. You can have higher detriments like that, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, this is what will happen to you. So that will deter people from doing things. But ultimately, I think that they need to have the knowledge to be able to police correctly, essentially, and policed with knowing their trade in a manner that takes time. So I don't know how long police school is. I think it's I could be mistaken. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it's definitely, I know for a fact, not like the 10 years you take, 12, 15 years to become a surgeon to go and operate in someone's heart, or the 10 years it takes to become an attorney, right? It takes a long time. But that's because it's such a high burden and you're dealing with people's lives. So likewise, I think that it should be a privilege to be a police officer. And I think that those that actually can kind of weed out the ones that are not good. And I know they go through boot camps. I know they go through, difficult trainings and things like that. And there's obviously differences, SWAT teams, etc. But I'm even talking about your basic police officer. It shouldn't be that easy to have that kind of, even, security guards that have armed, with them. They should have that accountability. So I think if it's harder to get trained, and then to keep your license, you have continuing education similar to us, and they maintain that, I think we'll have a better situation of people actually protecting highly skilled, right? So when they get into a high stress situation, that's why surgeons or ER nurses, when they get into a high stress situation, they don't go and just shoot the gun when they see someone that scares them, because they know how to deal with a high pressure situation. Someone's coming in and they're blue in the face and you have to now resuscitate them. They're not over here panicking and I don't remember any of my training, or I just go and like shove the wrong thing. I mean, no, they're really, are trained for this. So likewise, I think police officers need to have that kind of training, and I think that will actually mitigate a lot of the mistakes that happen, and also the bad seeds.
I'm confident you're very right, and
Thank
I am. And one of the things that I say all the time is, and you'll very much relate to this. I have a little limerick that slam dunks your whole point, which is when we were in law school, I'm struggling to get through finals week, and your head goes into a natural space of doubts, and you're just like, oh, what if this doesn't happen? And what? Oh my God. And, Widener being a law school that's trying to compete against the other law schools and grow its sophistication, its presence in the legal realm, they need to continuously heighten the standard to try to compete with the likes of all these other well-established law schools in the space. So for us, what I noticed with my other friends in other law schools is the cutting of the bottom 20% happened longer through our whole experience. It happened in our whole experience. Every semester, you're losing a bottom portion of your class, whereas for other law schools, that happened to stop after the first year, if not the second year. And so here you are in your last year of law school, last semester of law school, even with, could this happen? Could this happen to me? And one of the fact that in that experience, I could sit there and go, if I fail out of law school, I could still be a police officer. The bigger problem is that the standard to be the law is lower than the standard to fight the law. That's an intrinsic problem right from the start. And then on top of it, how do you solve this issue? When I look at yourself, my sister's a pharmacist. I'd like to think I'd be a great teacher as well. We'd all make incredible teachers. You'd make a strong connection with the youth, or even later years, higher education. You could communicate yourself well. You would be able to make a strong connection and have a lifelong impact on the future. However, you never even thought that would be that didn't cross your mind. It didn't cross my mind. My sister, the pharmacist, it amazes me what pharmacists have memorized. Like the fact that she knows every drug. You can pull it out your butt. She knows exactly what it is and what it does. That blows my mind. The fact that person never once thought to be a teacher, and she'd be great at it, tells you our reward system's probably a bit backwards. And so you just gave a strong, extensive explanation of how high that standard needs to be. There are so many expectations. I don't think I closed the point. So to bring it back to like the baseball thing, that guy's walking up to a door, a pull traffic stop every time has to anticipate getting shot. And 99 times they're not. But then if that person just came back from Afghanistan and they've got all this PTSD and now you're making them live in this stressful environment, or they never even lived that life. They've been living in mom's couch and dad's been a cop, I'm going to be a cop. And now some people just aren't fit for these types of stress scenarios. So I love the license position, because then it allows for a tool of measurement. Like that we now drew the line. And if that line isn't reliable, well, then we need to heighten the standard. Then we can just do that. It makes it more congruent across the board. So part of our problem is bringing it full circle, because I kind of put teachers in the same batch as police officers, not in that the risk and severity of stress is the same. It's in some ways interchangeable or different, but the fact that none of us would pick to be a cop, not before being an attorney or the president or a football player, but none of us would pick being a teacher over being a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. That's a problem, because those are incredibly important jobs. I'm not going to say a teacher's more important than a doctor or more important than a lawyer, but they are incredibly important.
Yes.
And they're falling short of the mark. So we need to flip our reward systems. And this kind of comes, and I'm only giving the long diatribe because it does kind of fall in line with a lot of the themes you and I have addressed through this conversation, which is that balance. And so if you're never going to restructure the financial reward system that makes the best in your society even want to pursue it, then you're stuck with the bottom of the barrel and you're trying to make this work. And it doesn't matter how much you play with the license standards, you're talking with the bottom of the barrel with the highest expectation. That there's no capacity to that. That doesn't last. So that's why we're dealing with the growing pains and the woes of the now, because that's where we're at. 40 years ago, the 500-pound dude eating donuts was sufficient, because he didn't need to know cybersecurity along with street smarts, along with, like, think of the sophistication of a detective today. I was talking to one of the detectives at our court, and just like cellular triangulating people. And now the mechanisms of their internal agency commuting with the FBI. Like you need to use their computer systems. If you don't know how to use Word, oh my God, the investigation has hit a halt. And thank God we prevented you from being an attorney so you couldn't unethically dupe an old lady into counseling her. But man, I feel safe that you got a gun and you're law and order on the street. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, different delivery, same message.
No, cheers to that. Exactly. One last thing, we could close the kind of dialogue off with this, just because it's one of the last notes I had before you audible to cops. Wait, what do I look like some cop apologist? I don't know. Anyway, my question for you is, you talked about commercials in the medical field and how that kind of has an effect. And for the first time ever, we're getting the strongest social, like we're hearing the loudest voices in this social conversation about medical commercials. And for once, like, an administration is actually talking about doing away with that, considering there's only 2 countries in the entire world that allow medical commercials. And it's us, and it's just unfettered access to the boob tube. And then the other countries, like, oh, we're limiting it. They can't just do all, like, I think it's the Netherlands. And they're like, well, you can't just do all medical commercials. So they at least even have limits on it. Us, it's just like Coca-Cola or McDonald's. It's just a commercial. And the fact that we live in a world where that it would be racist to even suggest that they could get a photo identification, but we're going to leave it to them to couch doctor themselves. Ask your doctor if Baga Booga Booga is right for you. And they're like, Doc, I need it. The lady was playing in the flowers and she looked happy, and I'm not happy, so I need it. And it surely couldn't have been because of the 3 Big Macs I had today. It's definitely because I don't have what's in that commercial. I truly believe we solve a lot of problems with the elimination of medical commercials. Part of that reason being cable's dying, mainly because the rethink tank's on the street and the internet's taking it away. Cable's dying. But Why? Why is the Joe Rogan Experience or something on YouTube more engaging and more drawing than the experts that have been the mechanism for the last 100 years? It's because they're compromised. There's so many conversations, informational pieces. I mean, if it was true journalism, if you had a TV show reporting on the Epstein files every Monday, it would be the most watched show in America. Every Monday, 8 p.m., the most watched show. But we're for whatever reason kept within this bound of what we talk about, what we don't talk about. And so when you start peeling back the layers of like, well, who's making those decisions? If every commercial break is brought to you by Pfizer, you start really seeing who has the voice of what's said on CNN, NBC, or even get away from that and look at MTV. Those people, so it's nobody's watching cable, but yet cable's still making all the money. It's because they're not getting their revenue from our views anymore as much as they're getting it from straight up direct sponsorships. And those direct sponsorships have been less just trying to get our billboard in front of more eyeballs. And it's become more, I'm paying so much now that without me, you crumble. And so I'm going to start telling you what you're going to say. And so, one, I think you get rid of medical commercials. You get rid of the major conglomerate controlling what's on just cable news or cable television or basic media, even Hulu, whatever. All of these types, the commercials, if most of them are medical commercials, they get to dictate what we're seeing and at least the lens at which we see it through. So one, I think cable gets better. All of our media gets a little bit more real. People get to just be creative and passionately make what's on their heart. And if it's a flop, then the people spoke. If it's the hottest thing on the streets, it's what is it? The Tiger Gang, or what was his name? The Tiger King? If it's the Tiger King and everybody's talking about it, then guess what? You've really got your finger on the pulse. You found something. But we don't even, like, every movie is a regurgitation of what we had in the past because creative thought is dangerous now. And also it's being stifled by who's writing the check. So I think two things get solved. One, we don't get to be manipulated. Like an ignoramus that doesn't know medicine doesn't get to be compelled down a road of medicine that some commercial threw them down. I should be able to rely on the expert to be the expert. I don't need to be walking in being like, hey, doc, you forgot about the other drug that I saw on evening news. Oh, yeah. Dang it. Good thing you had Channel 5 on, because otherwise I was going to put the syringe in your thigh. Like, no, you're supposed to be the expert. I'm supposed to be able to go in and you know all of it, and you tell me what's best. So I think you solve the social problem of them kind of manipulating the medicine. But then even more so, I think content, media, the landscape will become more creative, more free, more fruitful. So that's my argument for getting rid of medical commercials. I'm curious, as somebody that's lived in different countries and all of them being illegal there, do you find that it is something that it's so nuanced, it's not even worth our consideration? It's not controlling us as much as I'm portraying it to be? Or could it be something that requires a closer look?
I think that firstly, when you're dealing with medical commercials, there's a lot of red tape and like what they can and can't say, right? When they're doing the adverts, that's why you'll get like all the disclaimers and stuff. And maybe this isn't a personal Akifa opinion, but when I see things like that, it just makes me go, I don't know if I even want to do it. So I don't know if it's even doing more damage than good, quite frankly, because it's like, oh, it will cure your, I don't know, your headache, but you're gonna potentially have, I don't know, whatever, thyroid cancer, death, this, that. And you're like, wait a second, I don't know if I want to take that. So, first of all, I don't even know if those commercials are doing as good of a job as they think they are. So it'd be interesting to see those sales, from the commercials. Also, I think that aside from cable, I don't think that's necessarily the concern as much as influencers advocating for certain technologies. So my concern as a healthcare attorney is that you have a lot of highly influential people that will get paid a certain amount to go post on Instagram or post that they use this technology, but it's actually only FDA cleared, not FDA approved. And I don't know if you know, I'm sure you probably do know the difference because of law, but it's the thing is there's a difference between FDA cleared and FDA approved. FDA cleared, you can use 510Ks, you can pretty much run through the FDA a little faster because there's something similar on the market that they have an approval for. So you're saying that there's this new amazing technology or pharma drug that is out for depression, but it's just repurposed. It's repurposed. It's the same things as something that was already on the market, but you're just advertising it in a certain way to generate some profit and to put it, it has the same active ingredient. It's either the same active ingredients or very similar, mechanism of how it works and functions. That's why there's enough data. That's why the FDA doesn't need to approve it. So you get FDA cleared. So a lot of even the not back the testing kits for the COVID, in your nose kind of thing, they all got FDA cleared, right? Because there was something similar on the market and they just boom, 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 got in, and they got to like make profit off of that. Now, FDA approval is completely different, and then that's a de novo approach, and typically, and the different pathways you can go, it'll take longer. You have to actually go through clinical trials and you have to get your drug approved. It can even take up to 10 years. A lot of companies will fund 50 million, whatever, and then they'll sell their company after clinical trials 1 because they know by trial 3, which is human trials, they're probably not going to get it through. So they're smart in how they do their business, but is that good or not? I don't know. It's all business stuff, but I'm not going to comment on that. But in regards to, it takes like a 10-year process to get a biologic into the market. It takes a long time. And with tech, I would say med tech, it's much easier depending on, is it a necessity? Is it a novel invention? Is it a breakthrough device? Like, what exactly is it? With that being said, depending on how invasive it is, it can take much shorter, from 5 to 2 years. But I think that the big distinction is you're getting all of these biologics and inventions that are being marketed by people that might go, oh, I like how it works, but they don't necessarily know it's just the same thing marketed differently, and that I don't like. I think that does a disservice to the people, because people do highly hold celebrities and influencers, to a degree that what they say is true. And even my poor mother, now you're looking at elderly abuse and stuff, I would say, she's very competent, but she's my mom, so I can say that. She's actually very intelligent. You think I'm intelligent. She was a professor at Columbia. She was the only infectious disease specialist in the country of Zimbabwe during the AIDS epidemic. She would bring 40-foot containers of medication to the people and give it for free, miles long. So that's where I got my philanthropic side, and my grandfather too. But she won Doctor of the Year in New York. She's on a bunch of boards. She worked with COVID, Ebola, all that stuff. She's infectious disease. But I love my mom. As intelligent as she is, she's still a boomer. And sometimes she'll get confused because she'll look at the phone and go, oh, there's this amazing supplement thing or something came out. If you do the 4 things, Akifa, then this and this will, you will not have a headache. And I'm like, Mom, is it sponsored by somebody? Are they getting paid for it? Is it true? And then she'll look at it and go, oh, yeah, I think you're right. And she's very competent, so she'll pick up on it. But think about all the elderly abuse that comes along with that, right? And people getting taken advantage of. So,
Exactly.
and it's your health. So I definitely think that it would be wise to limit advertising. I don't know if it would be good to take out everything. I don't know what I would err on more of it would be fine to do that, but I would actually want to see what that would do, or in the US, I would say, because a big part of what we do is is the marketing for a lot of these things. So it would be interesting in how it would play out, because it's not just going to affect whether the consumer buys it or not. But also, will doctors adopt something? So, when you're going, there was this huge thing. I don't know if you saw it on Netflix. There was that documentary about the opioids, essentially, and it
Right.
happened to me from Florida. And people would come in all the time and like buy you dinners, etc. As a doctor, whatever. Hey, prescribe our drug, prescribe our drug. They'll give fentanyl to people, and then boom, like there was this huge issue. And so people wanted the drug reps essentially couldn't uh, bribe, so to speak, the medical professionals, or like get them entangled in this situation. So there are limitations on that now, right? Post that happening. So similarly, how would we have to advocate for our tech into the hospitals? Because for example, when you're trying to have a tech into the hospital, you have to go and pitch it to a champion doctor, and then that doctor that's a specialist that's like, hey, we need this tech, we need this biologic. Or if they have a clinic, they'll go and do it themselves, and they'll advocate for it. The hospital will then say, does it financially make sense? Are they covered by insurance? Does it have HIPAA compliance? Does it have interoperability with Epic and MI chart and stuff? Then they'll adopt it. And similarly, with doctors, they're apprehensive of trying it out first until they, until they can see if it works. Now, hopefully, if all the regulations are well and they're enforced, doctors aren't getting that kickback, etc., for certain kind of, tech or certain kind of biologics getting benefits. So, I don't know what the ads would do and not do, but I know that to get things in the correct hands, it would be harder for people and businesses, but that could probably be a good thing. And they have to go the right way rather than prying on, customers. So again, like we have to figure out the good or bad. But I do lean towards, the ads being more of a detriment than a benefit.
That was a very great approach to it, because it not only shows how nuanced the dialogue is, right? This isn't black and white. This isn't cut and dry. There's a lot of considerations that go into it, and some of the results aren't necessarily the symptom of exactly what you think is happening. With all these different players involved, it could be affected by multiple factors, and without kind of the full consideration, you might be getting a two-dimensional solve to a three-dimensional problem. So I really appreciate that answer. Of course, with such a long episode, we had a lot of fruitful dialogue, and we've solved none of the world's problems. Way to go, Akifa.
But hopefully we can through this, maybe we'll have platforms, that will able to reach a lot of people. So never know, this could go viral one day.
That's it. That's it. Hey, listen, I once interviewed the president, and that's pretty awesome, right? Here,
Well,
this is I could say in 2025, I interviewed the president. No, so I really appreciate your patience, and I was so excited to talk to you. It was a lot of fun being able to wrestle some of these ideas and have fun with it. Before we depart, can you please tell everyone where they can find you, and what else you might have in store for them?
yeah, absolutely. So please follow me on Instagram, Akifa Khattak. It's a complicated name, so just have it written down there. Instagram, Akifa Khattak, on LinkedIn if you're a professional and you want to connect on anything. And then also I have a personal website that's getting completed very, very soon within the next week, akifakhattak.com. I also, if you'd like to follow some of the projects I do, Codiva is the women's health supplement. Her Health AI is endometriosis diagnostics. It's a software as a medical device, and we're helping diagnose a disease that affects 200 million women worldwide. And then you can check out, if you want to book me for any other podcasts, public speaking appearances. I'm game again on my personal website, Akifa Khattak, or DM me. Thank
Love
you.
that. It's super exciting. And so, everybody, I appreciate you coming along this ride with us. If we made you laugh, if we made you think, the best that you could do to support this show is share that link. If you liked it, then that means someone else will too. So be sure to spread it around. In this game against algorithms, the best that you could do is just share that link. Otherwise, be sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button so you don't miss it coming back at you any other time. We do a live show every Tuesday here on the Rethink Tank. We also have our reaction show on Sunday. It's a bit of a fun palate cleanser from all the chaos. And with all these other different programs across the different channels, you can find it all in one central place, and that's at our website at www.rethinktankpodcast.com. So be sure to head over there so you don't miss any of the future content coming your way. But otherwise, guys, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace. Thank you, Akifa. You did amazing.
That was fun. I liked it.